Matter of Considerable Importance, a Safe Haven Orphanage Mystery by Patricia Asedegbega, Episode 3. Your one job was to search the desks. See the results you get when you improvise and decide to do things on your own? Your exchange with Abiadon was painful to watch. Just follow what I tell you to the letter, and you'll be fine. The three teenage detectives had convened after school to discuss the results and possible next steps. At least we know now that he's not the thief. You're quite bossy, you know, Kachi complained, still pained by the loss of his lunch money and the various insults the girl, in the short time of their acquaintance, had generously gifted them with. All you do is give directions that are of little help. Honestly, Nick, we'd be better off without her sharp tongue. You didn't even tell us who stole my money the other day. This is the first time this is happening to me, and I need to know who to be wary of. Chinene adopted a professional manner. Relax, Kachi. You haven't started crawling yet, and already you want to run. Every investigation follows a process. I'm still tying up loose ends. I can't just go about making accusations without concrete proof. Now, back to business. Anything else to report? She looked at them, waiting for answers. Not on my end, Kachi replied grudgingly. Well, you all know what to do. The clock's ticking, and every clue we find is important. If anything new comes up, we'll reconvene. I'll keep my eyes and ears open. That's the good part about starting the term late and having to sit at the back. One gets to see a lot of things. The girl smiled mysteriously and turned around to start walking home. Kachi turned to Nicholas after assuring that the girl was well out of earshot. I spoke to my friend Timmy in 4B. He knows everything that's going on and has agreed to introduce me to someone tomorrow morning who can get me whatever I need. I'll go with you. Perhaps he can tell us something of interest, Nicholas offered. Best I go alone so as not to arouse suspicions. You might say the wrong things and spoil our chances. Irritating as Chinene is, she's right. Those boys are like the mafia. A loud bellow announced the arrival of Kachi's father, and Nicholas proceeded to walk home surrounded by a cloud of worry. Wasn't what they were about to do wrong? It felt like someone was going to have to magically misplace a geometry set for him to recover his. Where was he to get the money for it if there was one available at a reasonable price? Tempting as it was for him to get his stuff back, there was no way that he could afford to. The fact that they were orphans meant that they had no uncles or aunts who would visit occasionally and give them pocket money. Everything people gave them or their mother went towards their upkeep, and it was never enough. Most of their school fees were paid by either church parishioners or well-meaning individuals who were inspired by the work being done by Gloria Olotu and wanted to help, but there really wasn't much left for extras. Like he had every evening at family prayers since the loss of his beloved geometry set, he had asked God to please return it to him. He still could not remember the patron saint of impossible causes, so he asked every single one he knew for intercessions. He planned to inquire with 13-year-old Hilda, who was a living encyclopedia when it came to the saints. Every bit helped. His mother always said to pray and not to worry over every circumstance, but he was finding the second part of her advice difficult to follow. Getting up for some water, he felt his way to the kitchen in the dark. That was the good thing about having frequent power cuts. Most of them developed a sixth sense in the dark after having collided with furniture on a number of occasions. By instinct, they now knew what to avoid. He heard voices in the living room and was surprised, since it was almost 1 a.m. He stood outside the door and listened. Don't worry, Mama. With what Chidi just gave me, we can pay the light bill, so I'll go first thing in the morning, he heard Uchi say. but we still don't have enough to finish paying this month's installment for the clinic bill. They might refuse to treat us next time if we don't do so. I've told my boss that I'll take any extra work he has for me. I hope they give us a few more days of grace," Chidi added. "I wish I could do more," their mother said in a quiet voice. "I have a few customers at the shop that buy on credit and they aren't paying, and their total just keeps increasing. I'll go to the clinic tomorrow to try and speak to the director and ask that he gives us some more time. I hope he's there. Last time his wife was quite unsympathetic. She made it very clear that they were not running a charity, and I had to plead and plead with her before she grudgingly relented." Nicholas imagined her resting her face on the open palms of her hands. "Oh, Mama, those people are wicked." Nicholas could feel the anger in Uchi's voice. Uchi was the first boy of them all who had been left as a toddler, note pinned to his shirt at the widow's doorstep. He had been the start of the orphanage that had opened its doors to the rest of them, and all the children looked up to him. "Don't sell to anyone on credit. They all see what you go through, the many children you're bringing up, yet they still go and collect things from your shop with zero shame and leave without paying." "And how can I say no to them?" their mother asked. "Bosie's husband lost his job, and she has 3 children to feed. Mercy's a single mother, and Dorcas a widow with 4 children. Dorcas's family made a lot of promises during the funeral, and all they've done is try to get their hands on everything they can that belonged to her late husband. Every day she comes to cry in my shop. How can I not accept her promises to pay? Don't people help us? We have to help others too. That's how I see life. We share what we have, and that way, we don't have to wait for tomorrow for things to be better for someone going through a difficult patch." Nicholas went back to his room, his heart heavy. His large family was always struggling. They didn't even hold any hope of attending university. Uchi had trained as a mechanic, and Chidi an electrician. They would all be offered an apprenticeship in a trade. A few months earlier, he had heard their mother have the talk with his sister Grace. The 17-year-old had started training in a fashion school the previous month. He understood the woman, he really did. But it was difficult finding sponsors for them, always having to beg for help. This way, they would be given tools to fend for themselves and start earning money, and then they could do what they wanted later. But Nick had a dream of becoming an architect. He had no idea how, but he was going to become one, and that was why his geometry set was important to him. It was the beginning of his future. He, more than anyone else, needed to get good grades so that Mrs. Momo, his sponsor for the year, would be encouraged to continue paying for his tuition. He often wondered what Uchi and Chidi had really wanted to be. He saw how hard they worked, unable to walk away from the little orphanage, knowing all the family went through, never really being able to get to the surface and swim free from debt or worry. It was too heavy a burden for their mother and the 2 young men. Uchi and Hadi had been adopted for a short while, and there had even been talk of the former studying engineering. But the death of their adoptive parents in a car crash had left them no choice but to return back home, and the boy had gone on to become a mechanic. They had all watched Hadi and Uchi leave with the 2 strangers who had been coming to see them at the orphanage. Their mother had cried. She had said that they were happy tears, that the children would have 2 parents who loved them and would give them a better life. However young as Nicholas had been then, he had felt that her heart had broken, and that Uchi had only agreed to leave because by doing so, he would be making things easier for the only mother he had ever known. It was difficult to know how the quiet young man really felt. He did not seem unhappy with his fate. On the contrary, he was good at his job and his boss was happy with him. But Nicholas knew that he did not want to learn a trade when he already knew what he wanted to do with his life. It was just a waste of time and resources. Nicholas did not want to not have a choice. No, he definitely could not afford for his grades to suffer in any way, knowing he was already at a disadvantage. No, failing was not an option. The two boys waited nervously behind the school at the appointed time, in an area of the school grounds in which the popularly known and overgrown elephant grass hid them from the view of curious eyes. Nicholas had finally been able to convince his friend that it was best if he went with him. "This is wrong. If anyone sees us, we could get into a lot of trouble," Nicholas said for the umpteenth time. Somehow Kachi had managed to arrive at school early enough to be there. He hoped that he had not tampered with the clocks in the house again. His father would soon find out, and then— "You needn't have come. You know I could have handled it perfectly on my own," his friend replied. No, this is my problem. How could I leave you to face those people alone? Nick was cut short by the rustling of grass, and Timmy and another boy appeared. Nick observed them, trying to remember where he had seen him before. He wasn't in their year. He was wearing trousers and had a plaque pinned to his shirt that said prefect. This meant that he was in the top form and held a role of responsibility. How could he be involved in such shady business? Nicholas was thrown off balance by what he was finding out. The boy followed his gaze and scowled at him. He looked away quickly, thinking that the newcomer wearing his badge must have been a mistake. "This is my friend." Timmy was evidently not expecting to find the other boy present and stopped whatever he was about to say. "Don't worry, you can trust him. He's the one that needs something. We were told that you can get almost anything," Kachi said, looking at the other boy who was evidently in charge. "Not almost anything. Anything," was the gruff reply from the older boy, who was sizing them up as he took off his badge and put it in his pocket. "For the right price, of course." Nicholas and Kachi nodded, like the prospect of being involved in such dealings was nothing new to them, as Timmy and the unknown boy waited for them to speak. Nicholas summoned his courage. "I need a complete math set before the exams. Can you get one for me?" he asked, sounding bolder than he was feeling. Thoughts were bombarding him, especially the ones telling him to run as far away as possible from the situation. "Of course, I actually have a brand new one. It will cost you 3,000 naira. 3,000 naira? That's basically the market price," Nicholas almost shouted. Where on earth was he going to get that kind of money from? Wait, was the plan to buy one or simply investigate if his set had fallen into the black market system and recover it? He paused as the question raced through his mind. "That is the price, my friend, especially if you need it on such short notice. Let me know if you want it or not. Exams are fast approaching, and there'll be a huge demand for it. I can keep it for you for 1 or 2 days, but can't promise anything else. Timmy will find me when you've made a decision." 200 naira, Kachi counteroffered, and the boy whose name they still did not know laughed at how ridiculous he considered the suggestion to be. "There's no wiggle room here. Like I said, either you want it or you don't. There has to be some profit in the transaction to make it worthwhile for me," was the reply the older boy gave to Kachi's proposal. "And either you want to sell it or you don't," Kachi said. "All those enforced trips to the market with my mother have taught me not to accept an initial price. There's no way we're going to pay what you asked, and without even seeing it. What's your final offer?" Nicholas watched the exchange between the two boys in fascination, wondering who would give in, when the boy laughed again. "For you, I'll give a discount. Final price is 2,500 naira, and if you want to see it, I'll show it to you after school today, same place. You'd better not be late, as I'll only be here for 5 minutes. My time is very valuable." "Where did you get it from?" Nicholas blurted out the question, and the look on Kachi's face let him know that it was the wrong thing to ask. The older boy walked up to him menacingly, his face very close to his. It felt like his eyes were boring right through him. Nicholas shivered involuntarily. "Don't ask any questions, and you won't have any problems. Understood?" Nicholas nodded silently, and once again the grass rustled as the two boys exited. "Well, at least we now have the possibility of getting a new one. Maybe we can come up with the money," Kachi said in consolation as they went towards the assembly ground. It was all just so upsetting and unfair, Nicholas thought. "Kachi's right. Just concentrate on coming up with the money. The most important thing at the moment is that you are able to sit for the exam," Shanae said to the two boys as they walked in an orderly manner back to class, trying not to be noticed by the teacher or senior prefect in search of someone to punish and make them sweep their classroom. It was a well-known fact that some senior students had not swept their class a single day since starting their last year of school, as they always found a way to get another unfortunate student to do their work. Shanae had evidently overheard Kachi and Nick speaking in whispers and had joined in. "I heard James say you got the highest score in the class the other day. He seems to think you're his biggest competition," which got me thinking. "About what?" Nicholas asked in a whisper. "What if instead of being stolen for an economic reason, your things were stolen by a rival simply to help him or herself in the final exams? Who's your main competition? Think about that and just concentrate on recovering your things instead of bringing down a well-established criminal system that's bigger than all of us." With those words, she walked away, shortening the space between herself and the other person in front of her. The two boys looked at each other. Nicholas had not seriously considered that angle. It was true that there was a competition between some students. Rita, James, Viano, and Nicholas were always in the top 4 of the class. They were basically the only 4 students to go up to the stage in the school prize-giving awards. For Nicholas, the ceremony meant more than just the recognition of his work and efforts during the year. It was special to him because his mother and all his brothers would attend, dressed in their very best, and they would clap from when his name was announced until the master of ceremonies would cough, indicating the need to continue with the evening's remaining activities. In the case of Rita, it was a healthy rivalry, but James did not take well to being beaten, and on a number of occasions he made a few statements, or even gone as far as accusing Nicholas of cheating or copying. Viano, on the other hand, had been a class prefect since his first year in school. Nick looked at the tall boy walking ahead of him. It was something often commented amongst their peers that if Viano continued in that vein, he would possibly be in the running for the post of head boy. Would he be willing to risk that much-coveted post and his reputation with such a petty act? Nick spent the rest of the day observing his classmates in a daze, wondering if any of them would go as far as to sabotage him in such a manner. Rita had come up to him, but James hadn't. He tried to remember James's reaction at his misfortune and then froze. He had turned around just when they had been walking towards the next desk after searching James's, and the boy had been smiling. Nick hadn't given it much thought at the time, but now the question arose, was he happy about the edge Nick's loss had given him, or because his plan had worked? Nick, of course, was not much help in the football match during break time, and from Abiodun's words afterwards, it was made clear that the boy had placed another bet and lost. He did not look at all happy about it. There was no way Abiodun would let that go. The game would be brought up again on numerous occasions. They had rushed to the agreed appointment, not wanting to be late, especially because Kachi did not want to miss it. His father would come for him, and there was only a small margin of time in which he could keep him waiting. And if not, there would be a very long conversation on the way home about the traffic in Lagos, the time he had made him waste that he would never recover, and the consequences of his actions. A few moments later the boy arrived, plastic bag in hand, and without a word, he took out the math set and showed it to Nicholas without letting go. "I'm not going to run away with it. Let me take a closer look. I mean, I should be given the same opportunity that any store would give me, right?" Nicholas asked. The other boy studied him with narrowed eyes, finally placing the tools in his hands, but standing so close that it was impossible for any action to be taken by either of the boys. Nicholas looked at them and let out a gasp. The other boy snatched the things away and put them back in his bag. "Let Timmy know if you're interested. He'll contact me. Don't speak to me directly if you see me around school." With those parting words, the boy disappeared into the tall grass, and Nicholas turned to Kachi. "That was my math set. The same dark smudge near the number 2 in the set square, and I noticed remnants of sticky tape in the long ruler. That criminal is trying to sell my own set back to me. I must do something. I'll see you tomorrow." Kachi was left staring at his friend's fast disappearing back. It really was just a hunch. It felt like he was clutching at straws, but he still ran all the way to class just in case. James and Steve were there, the latter being one of Abiadun's cronies. It was their turn to sweep the classroom, and as expected, only one was sweeping. The other one was chatting with a friend standing under one of the door frames. "Ah, Tony, I told you a volunteer would soon come along. There's no way someone like me can stoop so low as to sweep the classroom. Here you have the very generous Nicholas, who owes me a lot from his performance in the field in the last matches he played. I'm sure he'll want to make it up to me." The boy threw the broom at him and Nicholas caught it. Ordinarily, he would have done so simply so as not to argue, but today it suited his purpose. Steve and Tony left the classroom with a loud laugh, and James stopped what he was doing and looked at Nick. "You know, lately you've been doing things that make me wonder if you deserve the first position you've managed to steal from me. Everyone knows who's on the cleaning roster, and that it's not advisable to appear when it's the turn of any of the members of that little gang." James shook his head and made to bend down to continue sweeping with the broom made from palm fronds. Nicholas decided to go for a direct approach. "You don't seem to be particularly sad about my loss." "Why should I pretend? Someone did me a favor," James stated in a matter-of-fact way. "Turning in my last TD assignment late got me less marks than I deserved, and you, having to wait for your good friend Kachi to finish with his stuff before concluding your work, but still managing to score higher marks than me. You have to admit, that wasn't fair at all. Something had to happen to make things right, and the equilibrium needed to be restored somehow." "Did you by any chance help level the playing field?" Nicholas asked James. "Would I have tampered with your stuff if I had the chance? That's a very interesting question. That, of course, you can't prove the answer to. Good luck with that. You do know that I'm not your only rival, right? You were lucky to get the first position the last 2 terms, but luck runs out, and then balance is restored." The boy went back to his sweeping as Nick picked up the broom that Steve had unceremoniously thrown at him and started doing the same, trying not to draw the attention of the other boy as he paid special attention to the sitting area of the students who made up his list of suspects. This time he wasn't just looking at the floor, though no matter how poorly the students had swept after 4 days, no way would he find what he was looking for there. Most of the ends of the hollow tubes of the chair legs had lost the protective black plastic that separated them from the floor. He tried to lift up the chairs quietly to see if he could find what he was looking for that might make him shout a silent eureka. "I've done my part, so the rest is yours. Don't think that you getting roped into this would mean that you get to do less work. I've swept exactly 3 rows. Next time, don't wander into the class when it isn't your turn to sweep." Making a clicking sound, James and his backpack exited the classroom. Nicholas shook his head, understanding what the other boy had done. By sweeping his part quickly and leaving, he had ensured that Nicholas would be the one to clear out all the dirt. There was a pile of paper and dust at the front of the room that had been left for him. Hurrying, he examined the rest of the desks, looking in the crevices between the metal tubes, lifting the chairs. Nothing. He swept quickly and packed the dirt, his heart sinking. It had been a long shot. Looking through the window, he could see by the trickle of students walking away from the school that it was late. Henry and Nicholas had a pact to do each other's chores if one of them was late. Nicholas got to do his brother's more often, as the boy always had an answer for everything, and not every teacher loved that about him. So at least once every 2 weeks, Henry stayed after school to work in the school's vegetable garden. I can't be much later if I want Small but Mighty to wash my plate, he thought to himself, laughing. He knew that seeing him rush into the kitchen at the last moment with his plate would annoy Henry. Suddenly, something caught his eye and he looked down. There was a small ball of yellow paper right where he had not expected it to be. It was a very familiar yellow color, he realized, and he reached out for it and felt the excitement building up inside him. 10 minutes, she said. 10 minutes. It's been 25. Just wait till I get to the car. Everyone will be in a foul mood from waiting for me under the hot sun. I'm sure my uncle wouldn't have put on the AC for them. Why could we not have done this during the break time, like the rehearsals? Nicholas stared at Deborah, who had just rushed into the classroom dressed like an older woman in full traditional regalia. Why are you dressed like that? He asked, as she opened her desk and took out her backpack. For the school play we're performing during the prize-giving ceremony. Hey, not a word to anyone. She pointed a finger at him in warning before rushing out. And at that precise moment, everything clicked for Nicholas. He rushed out to look for the final clue. How could he have been so blind? The next morning could not arrive soon enough, and he was especially early to school. He needed the help of someone else who was normally one of the first to get to class. As expected, when he arrived, the boy's head was already buried in his chemistry textbook. I need your help, were the words he blurted by way of greeting, and Viano raised his head from his book in surprise, evidently not expecting the interruption. I'm almost sure about who stole my geometry set, but there's just one thing I need confirmation of, and you can help me with that. Are you game? The class prefect was silent for a moment, probably deciding how to reply to such a strange and unexpected request, then smiled and nodded. Of course. I saw how upset you were. Let me know how I can be of help. Viano closed his book, and Nicholas thought that in 2 years' time he would make an excellent head boy. He motioned for Viano to follow him, and they walked towards the field at the back of the school, where once again the tall elephant grass obscured them from the view of any curious observer. The next evening after dinner, Nick waited for his mother to sit on her favorite bench on the front porch. It was her me time, as she called it. Her eyes were closed, and he was not sure if she was sleeping or not, so he cleared his throat. She opened one eye suspiciously, as this was when everyone who had a request interrupted her. It never failed. She finally got to sit down, and people started remembering things they had to tell her. He handed her the sealed envelope and held out the kerosene lamp for her to see better. A few moments later, she let out a gasp. Nicholas! Your principal wants to see me tomorrow? The letter even states a specific time. Why? She looked at him in shock. Everyone knew that an invitation from the head of the school with a specific date and time was never a good sign. His mother continued looking at him, waiting for him to elucidate, and he took a deep breath before starting. It was going to be a lengthy explanation. From the corner of his eye he saw the curtain move, yet there was no breeze that night, so he understood that his whole family had gathered at the window to listen to the entertainment for the evening, except for Uchi and Chidi, who came out and sat on the bench opposite their mother, sensing that their support would be needed one way or another. To stay up to date with Patricia Asedegbega's work, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications.